Chapter 6: 7 Traps That Challenge Your Self-Discipline. There are many traps that can challenge your decision to become more self-disciplined and resist certain temptations. In this chapter, we'll cover some of the most common dangers for your self-control. Your future you isn't as different as you think. Studies show that due to a phenomenon known as temporal discounting, people value immediate gains over future rewards. Moreover, they consider their future selves as strangers. As a result, you may fail to save money for the future. After all, why save money for a stranger? And introduce other changes that would benefit you in the future. The rate at which people trade current dollars for future dollars is known as the personal discount rate. A high personal discount rate is positively correlated with impulsiveness. Research shows that heroin addicts have higher discount rates for delayed rewards than non-drug users. For a more common everyday example, non-drug users with a high discount rate would rather get 1 chocolate bar now than 2 in an hour. A study performed on the real-world data from the military drawdown program of the early 1990s showed that people faced with a choice to get an annuity and a lump smaller sum now chose the latter option, even though they would receive at least 17% less money by choosing instant gratification. Studies conducted by Elke U. Weber and colleagues suggest a solution to this problem. Instead of thinking about the reasons why you should choose instant gratification, think about the future reward first. This weird trick switches the order in your mind, making you choose between future reward and accelerating consumption, when it's easier to resist the reward you can get now because you don't want to lose the vision. Instead of instant gratification and delaying consumption, when it's harder to resist the temptation since you don't want to lose the instant reward. For instance, when you see a chocolate bar on your desk, think about the future reward first, a healthy body and mind, and then compare it to the present reward, a brief burst of energy. Your mind will consider the second choice less attractive than if you switched the order and treated delayed gratification as the loss of the chocolate bar. Envisioning your future self, whether you motivate yourself by imagining your feared for or hoped for future self, is another helpful technique to increase your self-control. Scientists at McMaster University conducted an experiment that proved the effectiveness of this technique. People who imagined their future selves, either feared for or hoped for, reported they exercised more. Another study confirms the effectiveness of thinking about your future self to delay gratification. Try both approaches. Spend a minute or two thinking about the best version of yourself, the kind of person you want to become. Then imagine the worst kind of person you never want to become. Which image motivates you to stick to your goals and say no to instant gratification? Keep in mind this exercise isn't about visualizing your success. It's just about bringing your future you closer to the current day to encourage you to take care of your future. I'll wait until I feel like doing it. Are you making excuses or making changes? I'll wait until I feel like doing it. In other words, it means never. If you find you're assuring yourself you'll start as soon as you feel like doing it, revisit your goals. Self-discipline depends on your motivation. With no motivation, there's little to no self-control, no matter how disciplined you otherwise are. Remember my story with the college. I should have listened to myself before I enrolled. All of us sometimes make the wrong decisions and set the wrong goals. If you find yourself constantly procrastinating, chances are it's not the right goal for you. What if you catch yourself making such excuses with important keystone habits? Then it's time to go back to the drawing board and come up with a more powerful why. Let's say your original reason to lose weight was to make others jealous of your new body. If you find yourself constantly postponing the day of introducing new eating habits, perhaps it was the wrong reason. In general, a powerful, encouraging goal is based on an internal motivation. You'll get much more drive from your internal need to become a better person than from trying to please someone, make someone jealous, or enjoy other trivial external benefits of reaching your goal. Men working out to attract women, women losing weight to seduce men. While there's nothing wrong with making a trivial motivation a part of your why, your main reason for change should come from within you, your own desire to become healthier, stronger, richer, etc. Research conducted in an academic context of motivation suggests that intrinsic personal goals, health, personal growth, affiliation, community contribution, increase both the short-term and long-term persistence of learning that intrinsic personal goals, fame, physical appearance, financial success. Come up with a strong why that will keep you going when the first rush of motivation goes away, replaced by the hard reality where success requires stick-to-itiveness, even when it rains, even when you don't feel like doing it, even when you'd rather stick to your old habits and give in to your temptations. False hope syndrome. False hope syndrome refers to a behavior of setting unrealistic expectations about the speed, amount, ease, and consequences of the changes you'll make in your life. It's sort of like a vicious cycle. People who fall victim to this syndrome make frequent attempts to change themselves, yet fail each time because they set impossible goals. The first part of the change, making the decision to make a change and setting an unrealistic goal, gives you a powerful boost of hope that makes you feel good. It's typical instant gratification. You haven't achieved anything, but you already feel like you're on top of the world, or just an inch from reaching it. False hope syndrome makes you come up with unrealistic goals because you're overexcited about reaching them. People say I can lose an average 2 to 3 pounds a week. To hell with it, let's make it 10 pounds. I'll be slim and sexy in 3 weeks. No entrepreneur succeeded with their first business idea? Yeah, right. I'll be a multimillionaire in a year. There's a limit on how much muscle my body can take on in a week? Nah, that's some nonsense. I'll gain 30 pounds in 6 weeks like this guy from the ad. Each of these examples sets the person up for failure. Once they start making actual changes with a cold mind, they will notice how difficult their goal is and how unlikely it is to achieve it. The delusion quickly turns to resignation, which leads to breaking their resolutions. And just like that, they're back to square one. While trying again and again is worth applauding, it's a foolish thing to keep giving in due to the same cause. The next time you're setting your goals, and especially if they're related to something that you have little idea about, set your mind on the action steps you need to take to reach your goal. And although dreaming big is an admirable quality, find out what average people achieve and adjust your goals accordingly. Thanks to this simple change in your attitude, you won't get discouraged by not reaching your unrealistic expectations. Decision fatigue. A study conducted on judges uncovered a disturbing finding. When judges were tired of making repeated rulings, they tended to stick to the status quo. More specifically, the percentage of favorable rulings dropped gradually from 65% to nearly zero within each decision session and returned to 65% after a short break. A study on making choices and self-control demonstrated that making several choices led to reduced self-control, exhibited, among others, by reduced persistence and increased procrastination. President Obama once said in an interview, "You'll see I wear only gray or blue suits. I'm trying to pare down decisions. I don't want to make decisions about what I'm eating or wearing, because I have too many other decisions to make." His decision to reduce the number of decisions he's making every single day helps him make better decisions when faced with more important matters than the color of his suit. Dean Spears of Princeton University argues in his paper that decision fatigue is one of the reasons why the poor stay poor. Since they have less money to spend, each financial trade-off leaves them with less and less self-control than the people who have more disposable income. By the time the poor are at the cash register, they can't resist buying a snack or other products displayed there, thus spending more money than they intended. Studies also show that decision fatigue can lead to decision avoidance. In the presence of too many choices, people tend to stick with the status quo. If you're trying to make a positive change in your life, it can mean choosing the unhealthy food you've been eating instead of picking one of the healthy alternatives. You can also learn from these findings and reduce the effect of decision fatigue on your self-discipline. It all comes down to simplification. First and foremost, reduce the number of trivial decisions you make in your life. For instance, spend less time and energy choosing what to wear in the morning. According to the 80-20 principle, 80% of the time, you wear 20% of your clothes. Reduce the number of unessential decisions by cleaning your closet and donating things you no longer wear. The easiest way to get rid of clothes you no longer wear is to ask yourself a simple question. If I don't own it, how much would I pay to get it? If you wouldn't be willing to pay for it, or you would pay very little, why keep it? Another way to avoid decision fatigue is to reduce the number of choices. For instance, if you're in a restaurant and you have a hard time picking your meal, choose the first 2 meals that caught your attention and decide between them. Better yet, ask the waitress to choose for you and have more self-control to resist the dessert. Last but not least, put to use the findings of the study with judges. If you want to make the right decision, do it after a break, not before it. And to stay on the safe side, do it in the morning when you've yet to make hundreds of little decisions. Stress. Have you ever given in to a temptation you vowed to resist because you were angry or stressed out? Well, the better question to ask would be, who hasn't? An Australian study on students shows that stress depletes willpower. Students who were stressed because of exams reported an increase in smoking and caffeine consumption. Their diet and sleep deteriorated, they struggled with controlling their emotions, exercised less, paid less attention to household chores and self-care habits. They also cared less about commitments and spending. The moment your mood goes sour, your brain starts searching for a solution to make you feel better. Usually, it means looking for an easy way to get a reward, and so you turn to the very thing you want to avoid: dopamine-releasing activities, such as eating, drinking, smoking, shopping, surfing the internet, playing video games, and so on. Most people underestimate the effect of stress on their lives. Everything goes well until it doesn't. Your body breaks down and you're left with no power to face daily tasks, let alone exert self-control to better yourself. Since physical activity is one of the best ways to reduce the level of stress, it should be the first keystone habit to introduce in your life. If you already exercise on a regular basis, here are a few more ways to reduce your stress. Number 1. Read a book. Reading a book in silence is a simple way to forget about the world around you and restore your energy. Number 2. Go for a walk, especially in nature. Studies show that exercise in green spaces, such as forests and parks, promotes well-being and recovery from stress. Number 3. Meditate. We already discussed how powerful it is. Number 4. Get a massage. Some people consider it awkward to get a massage from a stranger, even though it has been proven to be a powerful way to alleviate stress. Number 5. Spend time with friends and family. Enjoying the company of people close to you will help you forget about your troubles, and once you focus on your problems again, they will be easier to solve. Number 6. Cuddle or have sex. Physical intimacy, even a simple hug, results in the release of oxytocin and serotonin, 2 powerful stress-relieving hormones. Number 7. Listen to music. Music helps relieve stress and improves mood. Studies have also found it has a small pain-relieving effect. The key to reduce stress effectively is to focus on techniques that provide a longer stress-relieving response, not a quick release of tension. Dunning-Kruger effect, the restraint bias, and the empathy gap. In 1995, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a man named MacArthur Wheeler decided to rob a bank. Instead of wearing a ski mask, like any other robber, he smeared lemon juice on his face, packed his gun, and left his home. His logic? Lemon juice can be used as invisible ink that becomes visible only when you hold the piece of paper close to a heat source. Hence, he concluded, security cameras wouldn't see him. I can hear you laughing. It was broad daylight when he entered the First Savings Bank and demanded money with a gun in his hand and no mask on his face. He had the magic lemon juice, remember? Then he proceeded to rob another bank. A few hours later, the police watched the surveillance tapes from the banks and decided to show the robber's face on the evening news. An hour later, an informant identified MacArthur Wheeler. When he saw the police on his doorstep, a surprised Wheeler said, "But I wore the juice." Seriously, you can't make this stuff up. Wheeler's genius robbery inspired two scientists from Cornell University, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, to research incompetence and inflated self-assessments. The result of their study was what we now call the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias in which unskilled people overestimate their abilities, while highly skilled individuals underestimate them. The only way for the incompetent to realize the limitations of their abilities is to improve the very same skills they believe they possess. A later study showed that people overestimate their ability to control impulses like hunger, drug craving, and sexual arousal. It's called the restraint bias. When you have an inflated belief about the ability to control your impulses, you are more prone to overexpose yourself to temptations. A related bias is a hot-cold empathy gap, wherein people who are in a cold state, for instance, they aren't hungry, tend to underestimate the power of impulses when in a hot state, for instance, when they are hungry. These three biases can affect your self-control too. The solution to avoid them is to assume your self-control skills aren't as good as you think. If you assume you're not as smart as you think, you will spend more time making sure you're right, and thus avoid stupid mistakes. If you assume you have little self-control, and temptations can easily break you, you will do a better job avoiding temptations. Status quo bias and related non-rational cognitive processes. Status quo bias is a preference to keep things as they are. Any change from the current state of things is perceived as a loss. As a result, making positive changes in your life can be much harder than you think, simply because you will perceive them as losses, even if the current state of things is no longer optimal for you. There are several biases that interact with the status quo bias, such as loss aversion, tendency to strongly prefer avoiding loss to acquiring gains, and endowment effect, tendency to ascribe more value to things merely because you own them. Let's say you want to go on a diet, but there's still a lot of unhealthy food in your house. Because of the status quo bias, instead of making the more optimal decision, donating the food, you will keep it at home. And then, thanks to your restraint bias, you'll be more likely to eat it. The resistance to get rid of food is also related to the loss aversion. You'd rather not lose the food you spent money on than make your house free of temptations. Here are several ways you can battle the status quo bias. Number 1. Remind yourself of your goals and ask yourself if the status quo serves these objectives. Does storing tempting food in your house help you lose weight? Number 2. Asking yourself whether you would pick the status quo if it wasn't already the current state of things. Would you still want to have junk food in your house if it was free of it? Number 3. Coming up with several alternatives to the status quo. Instead of seeing things in black and white, come up with more ideas. You can donate the food, but you can also give it to your friend to keep it for you. Number 4. Not succumbing to the status quo simply because you have a hard time choosing between alternatives. If you're unsure whether you should donate the food or give it to your friend, don't resort to the easy choice of not doing anything. Pick between donating and giving it to your friend. Toss a coin if you have no idea what to do. Let's recap the 7 traps that challenge your self-discipline. Grow closer with your future self. People who prefer to get less now instead of more in the future are more likely to give in to temptations and fail at achieving their long-term goals. When faced with the possibility of an instant gratification, think about the reward from your long-term goal first. It tricks your mind, making it easier to stay disciplined. If you want to wait until you feel like doing something, reconsider your motivation. Come up with a goal fueled by inner motivation, health, personal growth, affiliation, community contribution, then external motivation, fame, physical appearance, financial success. When setting new goals, be aware of the false hope syndrome. Don't set unrealistic goals you're unlikely to meet, as they will discourage you and make you fall off the wagon sooner rather than later. The more decisions you have to make, the worse the quality of your decisions will be. Spend your decision-making energy wisely. Reduce the number of decisions you take each day to reduce the effect of decision fatigue in your life. Make important decisions after a break or early in the day. Stress kills your self-control. Make it a priority in your life to keep your stress levels in check. If you need to relax, choose activities that will promote long-term well-being rather than techniques that will result in a short burst of relief. People with little self-control tend to overestimate their ability to control their urges. Assume you're not as good as you think to avoid overexposing yourself to temptations. Avoid the status quo bias by asking yourself if the status quo serves your goals. Asking yourself if you would still choose it if it wasn't in place. Coming up with more choices, and not choosing the status quo because it's difficult to make a decision.